Today we have a video on one of the most popular, strongest, but similarly also more positively changed and positively affected by the changes of Blizzard from the War Within to Midnight. It's a surprise, of course, which is why we are making this video close to Christmas, because many players have lamented distraction, despair, and depression from the pruning effects and the cut down of their specs rotation, tools, historic spells going away, etc, etc. Instead, Frost Mage is one that has received many benefits from this change from one expansion to the next. Because the rework of Frost Mage in Midnight has come around a new center mechanic called Shatter. Now, before we even talk about the mechanic, it's worth pointing out that what this has done, it has sort of put in the background, limited to not being nearly as relevant or center of your rotation, Fingers of Frost and Brain Freeze, your, old school, long-standing double set of buffs you wanted to juggle as a Frost Mage. I'm just gonna give you, without even going too much into details, into the whys and the hows, these are your average, run-of-the-mill procs of Fingers of Frost in a Mythic Plus key right now. Solia's Gambit, plus 20, 28 minutes, you had about 140 procs of Fingers of Frost you consumed. In a similar timeline, 27 minutes of a few days ago in Mizara Caverns, this Frost Mage is proccing Fingers of Frost 48 times in 27 minutes. Not in the hundreds. It's, one-fifth of the amount of procs you used to have of Fingers of Frost, for example. That is possibly due to Fingers of Frost is being there, of course, right now in live to simply encourage you to press Ice Lance more, because Ice Lance is going to be doing more damage. However, now Ice Lance is a center of a different mechanic, more important mechanic for your toolkit, which is Shatter. Now, this might be divisive though. I have praised the Frost Mage at the beginning. However, many players have lamented a certain type of mechanic which will sound and feel very similar to the Shatter mechanic of Frost Mage, which is Festering Wounds of Unholy. The very same Festering Wounds Unholy is getting rid of in Midnight have been effectively moved over to Frost Mage. Luckily, they are coming with a good amount of quality of life changes, but the logic is the same. You hit enemies with certain abilities which are going to apply on them a debuff. And that debuff can be blown up for extra damage, AoE damage, even with other abilities. It sounds very similar to an Unholy Death Knight, putting a Festering Wound on a target with Festering Strike, and then blowing up the Festering Wound for AoE damage with Clawing Shadows, for example. Instead, now you have a Frost Mage using Frost Firebolt and Flurry to put Shatter stacks on the target, and then using Ice Lance to blow up those stacks for damage. Now, it might seem concerning at first, because one of the major issues of Festering Wounds was, number one, it was locking you on one target. It was making it a bit more hectic for you to navigate around a big Mythic Plus pool of 10 enemies whenever you wanted to change targets, for example, and then find back where was your target you just put Festering Wounds on, and you had to pick it back up from the nameplates, as well as the difficulty of target swapping, right? A new ad has created an Absorb Shield, is trying to blow up the party, and you need to break the Absorb Shield to interrupting or something. And Unholy DK was kind of at a disadvantage if he didn't already have Festering Wounds on that target, right? So it wasn't that nicely received of a mechanic. However, this new Shatter mechanic, Shatter system, does have quite a good amount of benefits, QOL improvements, to not make it feel as frustrating as the Festering Wounds system on an Unholy Death Knight. Now, first of all, we can already discard the entire Apex talent system of Frost Mage, because it doesn't really do too much for you. It's just passive damage in the background. Based on shattering the stacks, you have a chance to spawn a Hand of Frost doing extra free damage. The only real effect this could have in your rotation and in your toolkit is that whenever you proc this, it will also be applying one stack of freezing on the target when it procs, but that's it. The rest is just damage. is damage from the End of Frost, and the more of these hands proc, the more spell damage you gain. And lastly, Ray of Frost now does even more damage because it summons 4 of these hands on top of giving you the second charge on your Ray of Frost. But that's it. The entire base of your new toolkit as a Frost Mage is around Frost Firebolt, as well as Flurry, as well as your Ray of Frost, generating freezing stacks for your shatter, for you to shatter. And then you have Ice Lance, the follow-up of Ray of Frost, which is now Comet Storm. Comet Storm is no longer, like in live, a button on a cooldown. It is essentially what Ray of Frost turns into after you channel your Ray of Frost. And those are your 2 buttons you get to use to blow up your shatter stacks. This is what puts more emphasis now on your Ice Lance. It's no longer to consume the myriad of stacks of Fingers of Frost, but rather to consume the shatter stacks. Now this does put some more tinkering, some more thinking or planning ahead on your rotation in when exactly do you want to use your Ray of Frost, or rather, when exactly do you want to activate the second part of Ray of Frost, your Comet Storm. Because as you can see from here, besides the FPS drops you can see following the mega shattering of all of these stacks of shatter, the beta version of Comet Storm has each comet shattering 2 stacks of freezing, which is almost a carpet bombing of shatter clears. It will almost all the time clear all of the shatter stacks you have on enemies. So it's not something you want to do on pull, right? You don't want to pull with Ray of Frost and then Comet Storm immediately. What you want to do is you want to pull with Ray of Frost and then your double flurry charges, cast a few Frost Firebolt, pull out your Frozen Orb and your Blizzard on the big pack of enemies, look at those shatter stacks increasing on enemies, and once they're all nice and plump and filled with shatter stacks, you use the second part of your Ray of Frost, your Comet Storm, to blow up all of those shatter stacks. That is an option you can go for. As mentioned, there are a few of the mechanics that you centered your build around as a Frost Mage in live right now. We mentioned Fingers of Frost, but also Frozen Orb. Frozen Orb is another button that has lost priority in your rotation compared to live. Because right now in live you are essentially casting Frozen Orb more than twice as much, 2.5 times as much as you will be doing in the beta. And that's because your 2 easiest to enable Frozen Orb casting from live version of Frost Mage are gone. Both Cold Front, the one that gives you the casts for you a free Frozen Orb every 30 Frostbolts or Flurries, is gone completely. And the other one is Cold Snap, the one that makes your Cone of Cold have a 45-second cooldown, but give you a free Frozen Orb cooldown reset whenever you cast it, in AoE at least. Those 2 options are gone. The only thing that has remained for you, similar to live, but actually has been changed from live, is the small extra cooldown reduction on Frozen Orb based on Ice Lance casts. So every Ice Lance, which by default breaks 4 shatter stacks, is going to give you a 0.9 second cooldown reduction on Frozen Orb. So it's a very minor tools to help with the cooldown reduction of your Frozen Orb. It brings the spell from like a 1 minute cooldown to a 50-ish, maybe 45 second cooldown, but nowhere near the mega spam you used to have of Frozen Orb in live. So the live version used to have way more importance put into Frozen Orb, which is now cratered much lower down. It had way more importance put into Fingers of Frost, which is also cratered far lower down, to make space for the shatter mechanic. This is obviously visible in the damage. Nowadays, Shatter itself will be your #1 source of damage, close to, but should be the #1 source of damage in AoE encounters. Now, down the quest of streamlining and making the spec more fluid, but also predictable, as we have mentioned the reduction in the importance of the RNG procs of Fingers of Frost, there is also the reduction of the importance in the multiple cooldowns, because Comet Storm was already, as mentioned, no longer a cooldown by itself, but tied with Ray of Frost, and now Glacial Spike by itself is also gone, because the entire mechanic, what replaces the entire mechanic of Icicles to enable Glacial Spike, is now instead a passive set of cold is now instead a passive growth of these icicles. These are the beta icicles now. Every 6 seconds you gain 1 icicle, which means that when you have 5 icicles, it will have been 30 seconds. So every 30 seconds, your Frost Firebolt or Frostbolt is upgraded to a Glacial Spike. And the main point of Glacial Spike is the enormous damage it does when you play Frostfire, and the fact that it also applies 3 stacks of freezing. The enormous part of the damage of Glacial Spike is thanks to your Frostfire hero talent, the Flash Freeze Burn talent, which not only increases the damage of your Glacial Spike, but also makes it splash for AoE damage. That's the real value around Glacial Spike in AoE, not the hit itself, the splash damage it does, as well as the fact that now it's another thing you don't have to track or play around your icicles, because it's just a replacement of your Frostfire Bolt. So you have Comet Storm, which is going to replace temporarily Ray of Frost. You have Glacial Spike, which replaces temporarily Frostfire Bolt. And all of this is centered around making you track these shatter stacks on enemies. You can choose to play it the way you want. You don't have to break all of those shatter stacks immediately. You know, if you pull as the tank is grouping up the enemies and you throw a couple of flurries, a couple of instant casts, Frostfire Bolts thanks to Frostfire Empowerment, making your Frostfire Bolt instant, and you can grow up to having like 8, 10, maybe 12 shatter stacks on that enemy, you can simply go on, change target, drop your Frozen Orb, your Blizzard, a couple more Frostfire Bolt stacks on that enemy, a couple more flurry casts on that enemy to get to 10, 14 even stacks of shatter, change enemy to channel Ray of Frost on, because Ray of Frost will be generating a lot of freezing stacks. And then once you have them all up there, you can choose to drop down your Comet Storm and blow up all of those stacks at once. Or you can simply blow each and every stack you see immediately. You don't have to wait for it, just break them, blow them up as you see them. The initial damage is the same. The concept of Frostbite, blowing up the freezing stacks in AoE, is still there, so the damage will be there. The one benefit you have from blowing up all of these shatters all at once, there is a couple. One is your Apex Talents End of Frost. We mentioned it wasn't going to change your rotation greatly. This is just about the one change you can apply, which is damage from your hands increases your spell damage by 2% for 8 seconds. So if you break 50 different stacks all at once, you are going to have a concentrated amount of spawns of Hand of Frost happening all at the same time, because of the amount of stacks you're breaking at the same time, thanks to Comet Storm being the best way to break all of those shatter stacks at once. The other reason why you would be wanting to do this all at once is because of Permafrost Lances, because you do 10% more shatter damage inside of the Frozen Orb. When Frozen Orb is active, you want to try to blow them up all at once inside of Frozen Orb for the 10% increased damage. That's the other way why you would want to be doing this. I do feel that with this change, focusing around your shatter mechanic rather than your constant procs of Brain Freeze and Fingers of Frost, it can create a very successful specs for the dopamine hit addicts, being able to having to essentially manage and follow your shatter stacks, and then knowing, preparing for the satisfaction that you're about to blow up dozens of them with a single huge Comet Storm, I feel will be very satisfying, will tingle and stimulate and hit many players in the right spot when it comes to feeling satisfied in a Specs rotation. Definitely a stock standard, perhaps the gold standard of an attractive compulsion loop, something that we covered many years ago. For the old timers who remember, this is the ideal way Blizzard designs appealing specs. The anticipation of pulling a tons of mob, the action of knowing you are pressing abilities that are about to give you a big payoff, and then the reward of those abilities you put together is a very good compulsion loop for keeping a spec entertaining. Even when you look and see at a spec and you think it's very simple, why would players enjoy playing that spec? As long as this loop works well, many specs can still be considered engaging, even though their spec is simplified. In the case of Frost Mage, it has been to some degree. As mentioned, the importance of your Frozen Orb is not as high anymore. The importance of your Fingers of Frost procs are not as high anymore. You lost your long dated icy veins cooldown, because at this point you couldn't even call this a cooldown. It was almost nearly always active. That has also gone now. Now you go in a cycle of short cooldown windows tied to the 1 minute cooldown of your Ray of Frost and the 30-second cooldown of your Glacial Spike, which is upgraded from Frostbolt. Those are your buttons now. You don't really have anything else in terms of cooldowns, but it still works really well. The ability to choose when to iterate in these shatter stacks, when to break them. How high do you want to go? The cap of 20 stacks. There is no necessary downside in going close to capping at 20 stacks. When do you want to break them? I think it has been a quite successful rework so far for Frost Mage, regardless of the fact that right now their damage is also very high. Even if their damage was middling, our first impression of the way the spec has been changed compared to live is definitely positively. Now, at the moment, the only question mark is how to make this entire thing interact better with Spellslinger, because right now a couple of the features of Frostfire are just too good to pass up on. As we mentioned, Flash Freezeburn, because of the power of your Glacial Spike, and Frostfire Empowerment and the value of generating more shatter stacks is higher in Frostfire compared to Spellslinger. The current bonus of Spellslinger in terms of this new mechanic is just in the increased damage and in the increased consuming of shatter stacks. Not the generation of shatter stacks, but rather the consuming, which is not nearly as good. The only one related to the generating of shatter stack is complete RNG you have no control over. So we might require a bit more help to put Spellslinger on par with Frostfire with this new shatter mechanic, but besides that, very positive set of changes for Frostmage in the Midnight Beta. We will see how far this will continue to evolve down the beta of the expansion before release, but for now we are definitely on a good track to see Frostmage for once not be relegated to a meme spec in the shadows of both Arcane and Fire. So for today, on this Sunday, this is what we had to go over on this video. With this being said and done with, I'm going to leave you to the rest of your weekend. We're starting our goodbyes by thanking everyone for having watched the video, together with, of course, everyone else who's been supporting Competitive for free by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, no, there's like no hope. I'm looking at the weather report. It's like 7 degrees, 5 degrees, 6 degrees, 5 degrees until Christmas. The snow is not gonna be here. Perhaps I will see it in the mountains in the distance.